Now turn to section 1.
Hear a man telephone a travel company to book a holiday. First, you have some time to look at questions 1 to 4. Now the test will begin. You should answer the questions as you listen, because you will not hear the recording a second time. Listen carefully and answer questions 1 to 4.
Good afternoon. Italia Breaks. My name's Margaret. How can I help you?
Hi. I'd like to book a short break in Italy. Hotel and flights combined.
Anywhere in particular?
Yes, Venice if possible. We've been looking at some of your brochures, and I want to check if you have any special deals.
Right. Let's have a look and see what we've got. Right. OK. I've got the screen up. Can you just give me a few personal details?
Sure.
First, can I just take your name, please, and a contact telephone number?
Certainly. It's John Framlington. That's Framlington. And I'll give you my mobile number. I can't always remember it. Yes, here it is. It's 07987 441192.
441192.
That's it.
And how many people is it for?
Just 2 adults.
OK. Any particular price range?
It's our first wedding anniversary, and we...
Congratulations!
Thank you. So we wanted somewhere nice, but not too expensive. We would like to make it something to remember. Maybe in the medium price range.
OK. How many nights do you plan to stay?
5 nights only. That gives us plenty of time to do sightseeing and to relax.
Right. That's 5 nights only. And what type of hotel?
We initially thought of going for a 5-star, but that might be too expensive. So we've been looking at 4-star hotels.
We've got quite a few in our brochure, but the one I would recommend is the Hotel Scotland. It's 4-star, and I know there are rooms available because I have just made a booking for another client there.
I didn't notice that one. I don't know how I didn't see it.
It's easy to miss them. I've also stayed there myself, as we sometimes have to go and check out the hotels. And of all the ones I visited, this was my favourite.
Oh, right.
Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 5 to 10. Now listen and answer questions 5 to 10.
What's the hotel like?
It has a courtyard for breakfast. It's got 50 rooms. It's just been renovated, and so it's very stylish.
Is it in the brochure?
It's on page 63.
Ah, yes. I can see it's right next to the railway station. But what appeals to me most of all is that the hotel's very convenient for all the water buses. And the idea of having a terrace with the room, I really find very appealing. These are big pluses.
It's probably the most central hotel we have. You might think it would be a bit noisy as it's in the main commuter area and a place where tourists go. But from experience, I can assure you the hotel is very quiet. Most of the rooms are facing away from the main thoroughfare. Can you tell me when you'd like to leave?
The 17th of March. Coming back on the 22nd.
OK. I'll just check again if there are places available. 2 adults sharing. Hotel Scotland. Yes, that's gone through.
OK. And how much is the break, including flights?
There's a special rate at the moment because it's off-season. For 5 nights, let's see, it's £716 for a double room and flights. That includes airport taxes, but not insurance.
Each?
No, for 2 adults sharing.
That doesn't sound too bad at all. What reductions do you have at the moment?
Well, if you make the booking before the 17th of February, you get a further 15% reduction, subject to availability.
That's a big saving.
Yes, it makes the price very reasonable indeed. Do you need travel insurance?
Yes, I suppose we better had.
For 7-day cover for both of you, it's £17.88.
OK.
Do you want to book today?
I think we should, but can I just check with my wife? Can you hold the booking for me?
I can hold it until 1 p.m.
OK, that's fine. I'll get back to you immediately.
I'll just give you a reference for the reservation.
OK.
It's FAPSJM15.
Thanks. I'll get back to you as soon as I can, and definitely before 1 p.m. This is too good an offer to miss.
That is the end of section 1. You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turns to Part 2. Part 2.
To hear a reporter from the New York Times who is presenting a news report prepared by Dion Searcy and Robert Gebeloff on the topic Middle Class Shrinks, further as more fall out instead of climbing up. First look at questions 11 to 13. Now listen to the recording and answer questions 11 to 13.
The middle class that President Obama identified in his State of the Union speech last week as the foundation of the American economy has been shrinking for almost half a century. In the late 1960s, more than half of the households in the United States were squarely in the middle earning, in today's dollars, $35,000 to $100,000 a year. Few people noticed or cared as the size of that group began to fall, because the shift was primarily caused by more Americans climbing the economic ladder into upper income brackets. But since 2000, the middle class's share of households has continued to narrow, the main reason being that more people have fallen to the bottom. At the same time, fewer of those in this group fit the traditional image of a married couple with children at home, a gap increasingly filled by the elderly. This social upheaval helps explain why the president focused on reviving the middle class, offering a raft of proposals squarely aimed at concerns like paying for college education, taking parental leave, affording childcare, and buying a home.
Before the talk continues, look at questions 14 to 20. As you listen to the second part of the talk, answer the questions.
14 to 20.
Mr. Obama told Congress and the public. Still, regardless of their income, most Americans are identified as middle class. The term itself is so amorphous that politicians often cite the group in introducing proposals to engender wide appeal. The definition here starts at $35,000, which is about 50% higher than the official poverty level for a family of 4 and ends at the six-figure mark. Although many Americans in households making more than $100,000 consider themselves middle class, particularly those living in expensive regions like the Northeast and Pacific Coast, they have substantially more money than most people. However, the lines are drawn. It is clear that millions are struggling to hang on to accoutrements that most experts consider essential to a middle-class life. I would consider middle class to be people who can live comfortably on what they earn, can pay their bills, can set aside something to save for retirement and for kids in college, and can have vacations and entertainment, said Christine L. Ovens, Executive Director of the National Employment Law Project, a IELTS learning research and advocacy group.
That is the end of part 2.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turn to Section 3. Section 3. In this section, you are going to hear a conversation on animal protection. First, you have some time to look at questions 21 to 25. Now listen to the tape and answer the questions.
21 to 25.
Thanks for joining us today, Mike. How did Baja California become a consideration for a condor release?
Our recovery plan for California condors requires us to re-establish the birds in as much as their former range as possible. Baja, being the southernmost recent range for the California condor, works well in that they were only recently lost from the area, mid-1930s, and considerable habitat still remains. It is very isolated with very few people in the area. The mountains are spectacular, ranging up to 10,000 feet, or 3,000 meters. Our selected release site is at nearly 8,000 feet, 2,400 meters.
Mike, how many birds do you envision flying free in this area, Baja, in the future?
We will be releasing 4 to 8 birds on a yearly basis and will reconsider the situation when we have 20 birds in the area.
What age do the birds have to be before moving them?
That's a good question. Typically, we move them at 8 months to 18 months old. Birds are ready to fledge, or leave, from the nest at 6 to 7 months of age. In our current release group in Baja, we have birds as old as 30 months. It will be interesting to see how they behave. I expect that they will want to range more than younger birds and make it challenging for us to keep up.
Is there a maximum number of birds a certain area can support?
Yes, it's called the carrying capacity for any area, for any species. In our case, our strategy to find that number is to saturate the environment to a level where we determine that the birds are showing difficulty either in finding food, behaviourally, or in survivorship. That level is greatly determined by the availability of food in the area and nesting possibilities.
Now look at questions 26 to 30. As the talk continues, answer questions 26 to 30.
What do you hope to accomplish with this release in the long run?
I expect that well within 10 years the condors will be flying north and joining birds already released in Southern California. Hopefully we will reach at least 150 birds in each of these populations within about 15 years.
What would you say is the biggest contribution to the California Condor program's success?
That would have to be the fact that we were able to breed the birds in captivity from the 27 birds we started with in 1987 to the 205 birds we have today. This is thanks to cooperation between the San Diego Wild Animal Park, the Los Angeles Zoo, and the World Center for Birds of Prey in Boise, Idaho.
Are there any problems keeping track of and protecting your released animals outside of the US?
Nope. We are using radio transmitters and will be using the new satellite and GPS transmitters as well.
Which system is better?
Using satellites. The advantages over radio telemetry are numerous. It makes it possible to keep up with the bird's flight without being led miles in a matter of minutes. It took the young condor only a week to migrate across the state, and with just radio telemetry, poor weather can keep a plane grounded, and not all roads are accessible to track them on ground. New technology will allow one to be able to track birds that are not accessible by plane. Also, it is a new way to gauge the effectiveness of reintroduction.
How so?
If a condor transmitter works properly, researchers will get a location every 10 days for about 2 years.
Do you see an end in sight for the need to breed condors in captivity?
Yes, that would be great. But it will take a while for us to establish the two wild populations and make sure that they are sustainable. Part of our recovery is to maintain a captive flock of 150 birds in various zoos around the country as a safety net for the future.
This is the end of Section 3. You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turns to Part 4.
Part 4.
You will hear part of a lecture about a place called Cuba PD. Listen carefully and answer questions 31 to 36. Listen carefully and answer questions 31 to 36.
Good afternoon. Today, we're continuing this series of talks on the development of the Australian outback with a look at Cuba PD, the desert town of opal mines and underground living, which lies 860 kilometres north of Adelaide and 690 south of Alice Springs. The inaccessibility, harsh climate and almost total lack of water made it a highly unlikely place for human habitation. But that all started to change in 1915 with the discovery there of opals, the precious stones which seem to change colour according to their surroundings. Settlements were established following the First World War, when soldiers returning from the trenches of France brought with them the techniques of living below ground in dugouts. The depression of the 1920s and 30s led to many prospectors leaving, but the town boomed again in the late 1940s when shallow new opal fields were discovered, and immigrants from Europe arrived in large numbers after the Second World War. It must be remembered, though, just how hostile conditions were. Daytime summer temperatures reached well over 50 degrees centigrade. Winter nights were bitterly cold, and dense dust storms regularly blanketed the town. To cope with this, more and more people began living in disused mines and purpose-built subterranean houses, where the temperature remains at a comfortable 25 degrees all year round, so that eventually around 70% of the town's inhabitants had made their homes beneath the surface. This led to the construction of hotels and even churches below ground, as well as an entire underground shopping centre, the only one in the world.
Now you have some time to look at questions 37 to 40.
Now answer questions 37 to 40.
Perhaps not surprisingly, this has now led to the emergence of a secondary industry, tourism. Increasing numbers of visitors come to see the tunnels and the caves with their ventilation shafts, the weird machines lying about in the town, and, just beyond it in the scorched red desert, the conical hills thrown up by the world's biggest opal mines. It's a logical stopping place for travellers too. The nearest town to Cooper Pedy is Woomera, in the prohibited area once used for launching space rockets. But even that is an enormous distance away. Within the town itself, there are plenty of hotel rooms and a number of ethnic restaurants. Remember that Cooper Pedy is one of the most multicultural places in Australia, with an estimated 45 nationalities represented, and its very own Opal Museum. A short distance from town, there's a section of the enormous barrier that runs thousands of kilometres across the country. The dingo fence, which is meant to keep these predatory wild dogs out of the sheep farming areas. Another attraction just outside town are the sets of various films made there, including Mad Max 3, as well as The Red Planet and Until the End of the World. Names that reflect the harshness of the terrain and temperatures there. The name Cooper Pedy, incidentally, comes from an Aboriginal expression meaning white man's hole in the ground. Next, I'd like to go on to talk about Broken Hill, another mining town, but one that...
That is the end of part 4.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Give it to me.